In this video, we're going to discuss how to manage the flash file system on your Cisco iOS devices. Now, the Cisco devices, like any other type of networking equipment, has a flash file system on it that is used to store the configurations and the boot up images and really any other pieces of information you want to put on there. Now, there are several ways you can manage this flash file system. If the router has a web interface, then sometimes you can go through the web interface to manage the flash file system. But for this video, we're going to discuss how to manage it from the command line interface. So here we are in our Internet Gateway router. And when I set up the Secure Device Manager, I went ahead and put the Secure Device Manager on this router as well, just so there would be something on this router's flash. So we'll show you the ways you can manipulate the flash file system. Then we'll show you how you can copy iOS images and configurations on and off the routers. So the simplest way to manage the flash file system is you go to the Privileged Exec mode or Enable mode. And you can just use the same commands that you would use in a DOS window. For example, if we type dir, it automatically assumes we're wanting to look at the flash and gives us a directory listing of the flash. In this case, we have the file attributes over here on the left, what rights we have to it. We have read and write. It's not a directory and it's not an executable. We have the size of the file, the date and time the file was modified. In this case, I don't have time synchronization turned on this router, so there is no date. And then you have the file name. Down at the bottom, you have the total amount on the flash file system. In this case, it's 16 megs. That tells us that we've got about 7.5 megs free. Now, there are other file systems that are built into the router depending upon the model of router and the type of hardware that's in it. For example, if I do dir and hit question mark, it shows us that we can do a directory of the flash or the system partition. We can even do a directory of X modem and Y modem, although I can't say that I've ever done that at all. Or if you're feeling really adventurous, you can just say all file systems. List everything on every file system that's valid for this router. Let's do that just to see what the output looks like. So there is the system partition, which includes the running configuration. There's the NVRAM, which includes the startup configuration. Again, we have the flash file system that has all of these SDM files on there. And that's it on this router. The other commands that you can use for flash system manipulation is, of course, del for delete. You can delete a file right out of the NVRAM. You can delete the startup configuration if you want to. In fact, that's the way that you set a router back to defaults, is you erase the startup configuration and you reboot the router. You can also copy it using the copy command. And you'll notice if you use the copy command, you have a lot more options here. You have an option for the running config and the startup config. You also have an option for TFTP and FTP, which we'll discuss here in just a moment. But now that we're here in the copy command, let's look at one command that you'll use pretty frequently, and that's copy the running config to the startup config. Now, modern Cisco routers have kind of a shortcut for this. You can type WR, which is short for write memory, and it actually builds the configuration and writes it to the startup configuration. In fact, if we do WR and hit question mark, then you can actually see you could write the configuration out to a terminal or out to the network. Technically, this write mem command is an older command. It is a holdover from some of the older iOS images. It's an alias on modern operating systems, and the alias is for copy running config to startup config. And in fact, you'll see if we do that, if we do copy run to start, it'll ask us for the destination file name. In this case, we do want to write it to the startup config. And it does the exact same thing as write mem. It builds the configuration, writes it off to the NVRAM so that the router has that file in place when it boots up. The last command we'll talk about when we're discussing the flash memory on the router is the show version command. Now you might be thinking, well, why do we care what version of the iOS we're running? Well, if we do show version, it will actually tell us how much flash memory we have available to us. Down here at the bottom where it tells you the actual hardware configuration, it gives us the processor board serial number, which is the same for all of these emulated routers. It also tells you the versions of the software and how many interfaces and what types they are. Right here, this very last line, 16,384 kbytes of ATA system compact flash. That tells you how much memory is in your router. Now, you'll have to know that in order to upgrade the iOS. Because if you go to Cisco's website and you find the correct iOS for your router, it will actually tell you this iOS requires X amount of megs of system flash. The flash is upgradable, although you do have to take the router apart in most cases to upgrade the flash. The show run command will also tell you how much RAM is in the router. This right here, 121.856/9216 kbytes of memory. It divides it up like this because it uses this memory over here for the NVRAM. But you could add these two numbers together and figure out pretty quickly you have 128 megs of memory on the router, and you have 16 megs of flash available to you. And again, you'll need those pieces of information were you to ever upgrade the iOS, and we'll talk about how to do that in the next video. But for now, this concludes our discussion of managing the flash file system.